Have you ever stopped to think about what really decides what you get paid? Well, it turns out there's this hidden code, one that was written a long, long time ago, and it has a shocking amount of power over your paycheck. Okay, let's get into it.
So let's take a look at the very, very top of the corporate ladder. We're talking about top executives, right? The best of the best. Everyone is incredibly qualified, and yet women here are still earning nearly 40% less than men. So what on earth is going on here?
Now, your first thought might be the usual stuff, differences in experience or the specific job title, but those things don't even come close to explaining it. The real answer, according to some really groundbreaking research, is buried way deeper in the invisible programming of our society, our cultural values.
All right, first things first. Let's really dig into why this pay gap at the executive level is just so bizarre. Okay, let's just sit with this number for a second. 39.7%. That is how much less female executives earn compared to their male colleagues, on average, all across the world. We're not talking about a small difference here. This is a massive, stubborn gap at the absolute highest levels of business.
And here's why that number is so wild to economists. I mean, think about it. At the executive level, everybody has been through the ringer. They have the best education, tons of experience, and drive. The market at this level should be super efficient and filter out all the biases. A gap this huge, it just shouldn't exist.
Okay, so let's play detective for a minute. What happens when we run the standard economic playbook on this problem? The researchers started by checking out all the usual suspects you'd think of to explain pay gaps.
So the researchers looked at everything you'd expect. The executive's actual job, right? Are they a CEO or a CFO? Their years on the clock, how big the company is and how well it's doing, even what industry they're in. All the basic measurable stuff that should determine what someone gets paid. And this is where it gets crazy. After accounting for all of that, those standard factors could only explain 44% of the pay gap. That left more than half of it, a whopping 56%, as a complete and total mystery. That's a giant black hole in the data.
So, if the answer isn't in the economic data, where in the world is it? This is where the whole story pivots. The researchers had this incredible idea. What if the answer is hidden in plain sight? In the cultural DNA of the countries where these executives actually work.
So, when we say cultural values, what are we even talking about? It's not just about holidays or traditions. They're those deep, often unconscious beliefs that guide how an entire society thinks and acts, including, how it values different kinds of people and different kinds of work.
And these researchers, they were really thorough. They looked at two huge categories of values. First, the obvious stuff, direct beliefs about women's role in society, like whether they should get an education or have a job. But they also looked at much broader values, things like a society's views on religion, hard work, and even trust, things that can quietly shape how pay works.
Okay, so that's the theory. But how does an invisible cultural force actually show up in someone's real-life paycheck? This is where we crack the code.
And when they looked at the data, the pattern was just undeniable. On one side, you have societies with wider pay gaps. They tend to have more dogmatic religious beliefs and, get this, a higher acceptance of gender-based intolerance. And on the other side, cultures with narrower gaps highly valued women's education, women in the workforce, and things like hard work and individualism.
And this might be the most powerful and honestly sobering finding in the whole study. This single biggest cultural clue, the strongest predictor of the executive pay gap, was a society's tolerance for violence against women. It suggests this gap isn't just an economic quirk. It's rooted in some really fundamental beliefs about a woman's worth.
So remember that giant 56% mystery gap? The one that standard economics couldn't touch? What do you think happened when the researchers plugged all this new cultural data into their economic model?
Poof, gone. The mystery basically evaporated. Once you factor in a country's cultural values, the model could suddenly explain 95% of the pay gap. The unexplained part shrank from over half to just 5%. Culture wasn't just a piece of the puzzle, it was pretty much the whole puzzle.
But hold on. Just when you think we've got it all figured out, the story takes another turn. Because it turns out, this culture code doesn't affect everyone at the top in the exact same way.
When the researchers zoomed in on just the CEOs, the results were stunning. For them, once you accounted for culture, the unexplained pay gap went to zero. It completely disappeared. But for all the other top executives, the CFOs, the COOs, all the other top brass, a significant chunk of that unexplained gap was still there.
So what gives? Why are CEOs different? Well, researchers think the market for CEOs is just unique. Think of it like this. It's a global talent pool. There's intense public scrutiny, right? Hiring decisions are more transparent, more competitive, and that intense spotlight seems to burn away those local cultural biases. But for other top jobs, things are a bit murkier, and that's where the old, hidden cultural codes can still creep in.
Which brings us to the big final question. If this code is buried so deep in our history and our societies, can we actually do anything to change it? And man, these roots go deep. The research found that cultural attitudes today about women's role in the economy are directly connected to things that happened in the 1800s, like whether a society practiced a dowry system. It just goes to show you how incredibly sticky culture is. But here's the hopeful part. It doesn't mean we're stuck. The study found that when countries start making specific modern moves, like proposing paternity leave laws to help rebalance caregiving or pushing for laws that promote diversity on boards, you actually see the executive pay gap start to shrink. These actions can begin to chip away at that old code.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Laws and policies, they're important for sure, but true equity, that seems to require something deeper. It means we have to actually see the invisible cultural code that we're all living by and start to consciously challenge it.
You see, this research does more than just point out a problem. It gives us a map to the code itself. So the real question isn't just for researchers anymore. It's for all of us. Now that you can see the code, what will it take to finally rewrite it?